And I've talked a little bit about it before, but I can't emphasize it enough. And it's one of the things I'm really writing about in the book that I'm working on, that I think that most of humanity is not aware of, that we do live in a universe of free will. So you can hold your breath if you want, as long as you can. You can go out and lie to your partner. You can go out and steal somebody's property. And guess what? Karma's a bitch. Well, something's going to come back on you. You're going to lose your relationship. You're going to lose your reputation. You're going to lose your business. You might lose your freedom. You'll lose your own self-esteem because with your free will, you're going against natural principles. You're going against how the unified field works. And this is the part that gets forgotten in solutions for the future. I've said in both Thrive 1 and Thrive 2, thank goodness, particularly while we've been outnumbered, thank goodness we've got the truth, love, and the life force on our side. Because that's the most powerful thing there is. That's reality. That's actually ultimately all there is. And so let me read you a few more both and statements. And then I want to go into more what this principle is about how the unified field works. And as I was making notes about this, I mean, literally as I was typing some notes for this conversation, I get an email. I'm on the list of this guy, David Sorensen, who is too much of a fundamentalist religious guy for my ultimate taste, but he's done super courageous work on both in his blogs and in his videos on what's really going on in the world and how we can fix it. And he came out with a brilliant blog on, this is at something called Stop World Control. And so his blog is called, Can You See It? They Are Failing on Every Side. So I want to read some of the highlights from the list that he's doing that my main goal is not to give people information or make them agree with me, but to encourage critical thinking with as much information as possible. And so this dynamic, I think, can really help with that. So he says, the pandemic was supposed to last 10 years, resulting in the great reset of total tyranny with ongoing vaccine mandates and loss of all freedoms and rights. Instead, it launched the greatest awakening of all time. And I totally agree with both of those points. Then he says social media was created to become a tool to implement suffocating control over every person on earth. Instead, it has opened the eyes of humanity and created the greatest breakthrough for freedom in all of history. Again, I agree, especially thanks to Elon Musk. And that goes to his next point. Free speech was supposed to be eradicated through extreme censorship, and only a single false narrative was to be heard worldwide. Instead, their lies have been exposed and the truth is roaring louder than ever. Elections were supposed to be rigged forever, and only the puppets of the elites would be seated in the positions of power. Instead, election fraud has been exposed and steps are taken to secure elections while people like Trump are in office, destroying their rule. Food was supposed to become increasingly toxic to weaken and eradicate the population. Instead, there is a worldwide awakening concerning how bad food has become, and mankind is looking to return to healthy and natural sources of food. AI, artificial intelligence, was supposed to become the master over mankind, enslaving all of us. Instead, AI is being used to empower us and elevate the creativity of humanity to new levels, enabling us to reach greater heights. All private property was supposed to be seized from humanity, and only the elites would own anything, while everyone else would rent everything. Instead, Trump is laying the foundations to shift the wealth from the elites back to the people. America was supposed to be totally destroyed to make way for a one-world government. Instead, America is being cleaned from corruption and being rebuilt to become stronger than ever before. The World Health Organization was supposed to be the one world government during any self-proclaimed pandemic, so they could impose tyranny on every nation. Instead, the five greatest nations of the world, USA, Russia, China, India, and Brazil, have rejected the pandemic treaty, leaving the WHO whining in the dirt. Vaccines were supposed to keep increasing to wipe out most of the human population, which would be blamed on climate change and pandemics. Instead, RFK Jr. is investigating all childhood vaccines, and there will come a grand reformation of the vaccine program. Okay, there are others in his writing, but that hits a lot of the great highlights. So to me, the question is, wow, how did this work? How did we do it? And I mean this to everyone on this call, even though there's a lot of different perspectives on this call. Anyone in this group has been a significant participant and contributor to this global awakening, and I congratulate you, because I think that the way it works is that there has been a misunderstanding in psychology and in physics. It looks in the short term like a bully has got the power, but in actuality, a bully is operating out of fear and is very vulnerable and unstable. So just as in the martial arts, they say the only thing more scary than a madman is a master. Because a madman's got a lot of force, but he doesn't have the wisdom, doesn't have the balance, doesn't have the situational awareness, doesn't have the compassion to actually operate in alignment with the field. So that's on the psychological side. On the physics side, physics, and I studied a lot of physics in school, ultimately became disillusioned and dropped out of a very advanced program because I didn't feel like I was being told the truth. But I spent the rest of my life studying the cutting edge alternative physics, which is now coming up with major, major truths. So in regular physics, they teach you that every action is responded to by an equal and opposite reaction. And if you go and bang your forehead against the wall, you will feel an equal and opposite reaction. There is some truth to that. But if you throw a tennis ball against the wall straight on, it'll come back to you. But if you do it at an angle, it'll go somewhere else. If you're on a dock getting onto a boat and you jump onto the back of the boat, well, the back of the boat is going to move with you as it absorbs your weight. And then the front of the boat is going to swing back the other way. And that reveals what Buckminster Fuller showed the world was actually the deeper truth, is that every action creates a reaction, which then creates a resultant. It's a three-part process, not a two-part process. So you have action, reaction, resultant. And in the unified field, the would-be tyrants have been trying to control us all, to keep their own fear at bay by PRS, problem, reaction, solution, the Hegelian dialectic. And that has had a certain amount of force. You create a pandemic, you create a financial collapse, you create a starvation, you create a war, something to terrify humans, and they, for some period of time, become more controllable. And they thought that strategy would take them all the way to fulfillment of the Global Domination Agenda. And man, were they close. They were close with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. They were close with the Copenhagen Climate Agreement. They were close with the WHO Pandemic Treaty. And you know who single-handedly got us out of all three of those really, really dangerous situations was, the buffoon Donald Trump. And I agree, he is a buffoon. He's kind of a macho, crass, not a nuanced guy. And yet he single-handedly said no to all three of those things. And I cringe to think where we would be if any one of the three had enabled the one world government, which was their purpose. Much less if we were under a communist administration in the US right now. So I believe that what David Sorensen is outlining here is that when there's an action, or when there's an evil action, for instance, it creates a reaction in people but it also creates a resultant, and the resultant is waking up. And I do believe we're in the greatest awakening in human history, certainly the recorded history on this planet. I'll bet this has gone on in similar ways on literally millions or billions of planets. It's kind of fun to think of it because I think this is a natural dynamic. I think consciousness itself is evolving through the self-reflection stages where at one point we're at risk of blowing ourselves up, and then we actually get it, that we're not going to survive as a species unless we align with the unified field, and that means aligning with the ethics of the non-aggression principle, and that means going beyond the myth of authority and government itself. And that's a preview of my book, which will hopefully be coming out next year. But anyway, the most important point here is that they didn't anticipate love. They didn't anticipate truth. They didn't anticipate the resultant of consciousness awakening and then expressing itself through both compassion and through bravery. Actually taking a stand for what each individual is discovering to be true.